Welcome back. Thanks for staying with Newsnight. British Prime Minister Theresa May says Africa is a strategic trade partner for the United Kingdom. May will visit Nigeria and Kenya after her South African trip. Her government is looking for new trade partners as it pulls out of the EU. For more on this, we're now joined by our UK correspondent, Natalie Powell. Good evening, Natalie. Is this, trip as big a deal in the UK as it is here?
Well, there's a lot to be said about that, of course, given that African nations are going to be invited to China very soon. But the UK is certainly on a bit of a charm offensive here, as we can see, and we have seen throughout the day with Theresa May's visit, of course. And that's because of one very important reason for the UK, is that currently at the moment it needs some friends. It will be leaving the European Union at the end of March next year, of course. And when it leaves the EU, it will be leaving its biggest trading partner. So at the moment, the UK government certainly on a bit of a charm offensive to try and strengthen relations with other countries around the world. And it seems to have firmly in its sight the African continent. We know, of course, that Theresa May and Cyril Ramaphosa have both talked about stronger links within the Commonwealth as well. That's something that they share in common. And certainly from this visit, we can see that she is very much focused on those Commonwealth countries, as you said, South Africa, Nigeria and Kenya, that she will be visiting throughout this the next 3 days, of course, of this visit. So when Brexit happens, it does certainly look like the UK government is looking towards the African continent as a place to start new links and new ties, be that trade or be that investment.
Well, Brexit or not, she spoke this morning of her attempts to renew historic partnership with the continent, but which, as everyone knows, is one of colonialism on the one hand and another of very skewed trade relations on the other, skewed in Britain's favor.
Yes, certainly. And in fact, the UK government, perhaps adding to that even more, it wants to invest £4 billion, that's around 72 billion rand, in African nations' economies as part of this. It also believes that businesses will match that, UK businesses will match that, coming into Africa with similar sums of money. And I think the UK Prime Minister was very open and honest in much of what she had to say earlier on in Cape Town, saying that this was also beneficial to the UK as well. If it invests in African nations as they are on the up, well, that is going to have a lot of economic benefit for the UK, and that's going to be particularly important, of course, when Brexit happens. Other announcements made, of course, is that the UK wants to be the biggest investor of all of the G7 nations in Africa by 2022. So it's got a fair bit of work to do ahead of that. But as I've said, this focus on Africa, very, very important. And the third biggest takeaway, perhaps, is the fact that the UK wants to still remain part of EPA. That's the Economic Partnership Agreement with Southern Africa. When it leaves the European Union, of course, it will sign back up to that as an individual member.
Well, picking up, if I may, Natalie, on that point you made, which is, of course, comes from a remark she made this morning, that she wants the UK to become the G7's biggest investor by 2022. Will she be there to see that, given that there have been calls from within her own party for her to go?
I think at this stage, Vio, that is really anybody's guess. We've seen Theresa May live to fight another day on a number of occasions here in the UK. She has a really big task on her shoulders, which is getting the UK to exit the European Union. A lot of people don't think that she will carry on, that she will be able to stand the current situation, and a lot of people concerned about what her Brexit vision will do to the country, and therefore possibly we could see her not carrying on in that position as UK Prime Minister for very much longer. But as I've said, she's managed to last this long. It would appear that there are very few other contenders that want to take on this colossal task of exiting the European Union when that happens in March. But I would imagine that whatever happens, Vuyo, that the UK government in the seat, whether that be Theresa May or whether that be somebody else, will remain committed to the plans to invest in Africa over the next 4 years.
Well, she's lasted this long, as you say, but I mean, over the past year, she has been trying, it would seem, to move away from the Thatcherite conservatism that was the hallmark of the Conservative Party over the years, which some pundits say is what has constrained that political party. But has she been able to come up with a better or well understood vision of where she is taking both her party and the country?
I would say that at the moment the UK Prime Minister is pretty much walking a tightrope. She has many among her backbench that want to see the return of a very strong conservative ethos and perhaps more to the right of her party. She also knows that there are many in Britain who are perhaps more left of centre, and therefore she does have to tread this very, very careful tightrope. We've seen that time and time again, nowhere perhaps as obvious as in Brexit, given that the Brexit vote was pretty much split down the middle, 52% voting to leave the European Union, 48% voting to remain. So she's got a big task ahead to try and keep everybody happy. And I think what we've seen today, of course, when she was making these announcements in Cape Town, is very much that struggle of her trying to appease those more far right on her backbench, and also to appease those perhaps more in the middle or more to the left. One of those things she spoke about was aid, and this was perhaps very much where it was very significant that she was trying to appease those on her backbenches who said that the UK gives far too much aid to foreign countries and that money could be used better within the UK. Well, she said herself that she is being very strategic with the UK's aid budget, and that it will only donate aid where there are benefits to the UK as well. So as we can see, Theresa May really trying to appease many in her government, in her party, who say that she is not going far enough, she is not doing enough for the UK, and that a lot of money is being spent on other areas where it could be used within her own country.
Natalie, let's leave it there. We do know, of course, that aid is never really about benevolence. There's always something behind it. Well,